Hello, everyone. Welcome to MEER Talk. My name is Kaeza Fern, and I'm the Director of Communications at MEER. We are really glad to be getting together for another MEER Talk. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Peter Carter, and then we'll have some questions from the MEER community. We'd like to update you that Dr. Tao is currently attending COP28 in Dubai, and we think it's important for MEER to be there. If you would like to contribute toward our efforts to cool the planet, we appreciate your donations. You can go to meer.org/donate. And thank you to those of you who are contributing. You can also write to community@meer.org if you want to be in touch. So let me tell you about our guest speaker. Dr. Peter Carter is a retired family and emergency physician who founded the Climate Emergency Institute in 2008. He has served as an expert reviewer for the IPCC, and in 2018, he co-authored Unprecedented Crime: Climate Science Denial and Game Changers for Survival. He lives in Victoria, the capital of British Columbia in Canada. So welcome, Dr. Carter. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you very much, and hello out there, and thank you for allowing me to join you and discuss some of the things that I know you all take very seriously and very genuinely. And I just want to say I love the mere idea of reflective roofs in the tropics. I think that's just absolutely wonderful. So there we are. So there's my title, the rapidly deteriorating climate emergency, and what I think about what we might be able to do about it. Now, of course, the last thing we needed is the fantasy of 1.5 still being able to limit to 1.5, but there we are. So I would certainly call that out of the frying pan into the hothouse Earth, and I'll be focusing a bit on hothouse Earth because you'll understand that that is exactly where we're headed. 50 plus years of saving the planet. Yeah, we've been doing this a long time. It's 30 years, for heaven's sake, since the United Nations Climate Convention. Now, this is a quote from NOAA. They put out two very, very useful reports every year. This one is called The Power of Greenhouse Gases, and the other one, which is very useful, is called the Greenhouse Gas Index. So here's what NOAA says, and they're absolutely right. We are committing Earth and ourselves to climate chaos for thousands of years. And you'll understand that the present Earth energy imbalance and radiative forcing determines that for sure, no matter what people hopefully say about 1.5. Now, I put the Edmund Burke quote here. I mean, I know it's used a lot, but maybe it's never been more apt. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. So we've got a lot of talking, but not a lot of doing. And it's one thing I like about MEER. They're involved in doing things. So I should start with the famous Jim Hansen paper, his global warming in the pipe. A long paper. He did cut it down to 50% of the size. Anyway, the interesting thing, of course, is that he says that we have at least 2.4 degrees C in the pipe, so-called, because that's what our radiative forcing translates to. We're well over 3.2 wilms per square meter. So that definitely puts us far above 2 degrees C. And of course, in the paper, he says that we're going to have to go to some kind of cooling of the planet. Oh, my God, I never thought I'd live to see the day that we had to do that, but there we are. Unfortunately, from my point of view, he just mentions stratospheric aerosol. And so, of course, my immediate question will be, well, why not artificial albedo? And it shouldn't be an either-or thing either, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is from the sixth assessment, and I'm trying to communicate the fact that the IPCC is very definite that for mitigation for 2 degrees C, as well as 1.5 degrees C, global emissions have to be put in decline immediately. They have the word immediately frequently in the AR6 report. And this is how dire the situation is. This is the other quote. Any further delay in concerted global action will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. Now, you know about the conservatism of the IPCC. Well, when you have the IPCC saying we have to secure a livable future, we are in deep, deep trouble. So the image on the right there is radiative forcing from the most recent NOAA greenhouse gas index, and I think it was 3.29. Anyway, it's well above 3. So the situation is, and I follow the climate indicators. That's sort of what I do mainly with the Climate Emergency Institute, and trying my luck in Twitter and Facebook. So the situation continues to be the same as it's been for years. All climate change indicators are at record highs, and that's including all greenhouse gas emissions, and they're increasing still at record rates. And on top of that, of course, now we have wetland methane feedback emissions. So that's one of those things that changes everything very, very much for the worse, of course. Global fossil fuel CO2 emissions has been projected by Cicero, and they say, of course, it's going to be a record high in fossil fuel CO2 emissions. And the US EIA, they put out their energy outlook last month, and they're pretty reliable to my mind. And they say that we will not be declining emissions. By 2050, they put us at 15% higher than today. So we're looking at end of the world situations here. The acceptance of net zero by negative emissions, that's sort of the last thing we needed. Yeah, maybe we need to do it, but it'll take 20 or 30 years. So we have to do something a lot faster than that. We also have no call from science for this immediate rapid emissions decline. And that more than mystifies me. It's absolutely unbelievable. We have the chair of the IPCC, Hussein Lee, both in COP 25 and 26 at the opening plenary, saying that we had to put global emissions into immediate decline. It's just not being put out there. Science in general, as I say, seems to be resorting to a fantasy world. I guess that might keep some people happy, but it certainly doesn't keep me happy. The United Nations climate negotiations are solidly based, as you will have heard, by the assumption of 1.5 degrees C. We have, in addition, still, we have fossil fuel subsidies from our governments. The IMF does this periodically, and it's now increased to $7 trillion a year. That's the total financial benefits that world governments are allowing to the fossil fuel industry. The recent report from UNEP, their emissions gap report, pointed out that in the past 3 years, direct fossil fuel emissions have doubled to the fossil fuel industry. We need the world of science to call for the immediate termination of those subsidies. The whole situation for many years on climate change has been one of a global suicidal approach. So we need some powerful interventions, and all I can do is hope that the science academies see fit to do that one day soon. So Jim Hansen, in his paper, puts it at 2.4 degrees C, as I say. I get it 2.8 degrees C. He subtracted aerosols, so I think it's higher. Anyhow, they're all accelerating. Radiative forcing, Earth energy imbalance, they're all accelerating global surface temperature, of course. and they are going to continue because of all the energy that we have in the pipe, so-called. So therefore, global surface heating is going to keep accelerating faster, as I think this was Jim's main point, his paper, as well as criticizing the IPCC on their ludicrous 3 degrees C climate sensitivity. So that was a good thing. Thanks for doing that, Jim. And to amplifying feedbacks, which we are now entered into, they will keep increasing. Oh, and tipping points will be crossed. There we go, Julie, you got that in there. So the production gap report, I think this is the best of the pre-COP reports, and this one's pretty devastating, right? This is from UNEP and ISD and a couple of other organizations. So our government plans are that they will support and promote, because they are promoting, our governments are promoting more fossil fuels. And we're looking at 110% above the 1.5 degrees limit, according to their plans, and 70% above the 2 degree C limit. So after 30 years, right, of negotiations, 6 assessments by the IPCC, here we are today in 2023, and our governments are planning to be 110% on emissions above 1.5 and 70% above 2. And hence the quote from Edmund Burke of evil in the absence of doing nothing. Emissions, at least on the COP28 draft, they do have that emissions have to drop 45% by 2030, so that's good. But of course, the COPs always end up with a non-result, and this one will be no different. So the book that I co-authored in 2018 was a very interesting project to write a book. You learn all kinds of stuff. So I came to the conclusion that we would never have enough, that we need a Manhattan-type project, Apollo Manhattan Marshall Project, because we have to rebuild the world for zero carbon. And we also have to develop, this is where the Manhattan comes in, we don't have a method to extract CO2. So we're going to have to get scientists together, fully resourced like Manhattan was, and they'll have to invent something that we don't have, because we just don't have enough. So there's an image that I borrowed 30 years after the 1992 convention. Climate change is increasing faster than ever, and it is increasing faster than ever. So this is sort of what I do when I'm short of something else to do. So I put all these indicators together a couple of years ago, and they look a bit messy, but they're all skyrocketing. It's absolutely insane. We are in a totally insane situation. Everything is getting worse faster, and it's been that way for years. Every year, things are worse. Now, you'll have come across, I'm sure, the big paper by Karina von Schuckmann and 15 other authors, and they confirmed, the NOAA NASA finding that Earth energy imbalance is increasing fast, and it's doubled over the past 10 years. That, of course, is absolutely awful, but our scientists and policymakers and governments still haven't woken up. I mean, how often are we going to hear this as a wake-up call and nothing happens? So this means that we are headed fast for hothouse Earth. This I just got the other day. This is from CIRRUS, and it's a NASA visualization. And this is their, they call this their radiative balance. It's the Earth total heat content accounts for the greenhouse gas of CO2, as you can see, but it also accounts for clouds because it's CIRRUS, and it accounts for the increasing loss of aerosol. So we're losing cooling capacity. And of course, we've got the El Nino running as well. So you can see very, very clearly this is accelerating, right? From 2000 on the short term. And just look at that increase of this year, 2023. Oh my God. So, as the Jim Hansen paper says, we're going to have to resort to cooling. But when people go straight to SRM, they don't seem to consider anything else. Now, firstly, that doesn't make sense in strategically managing a complex, large-scale problem. You want to use, or at least try, all the methods you can so that you minimize side effects and maximize the opportunity of success. So there are big problems with injecting aerosols. There are big barriers, and I think it's very important to be aware of these. One is governance. I mean, the scientists have been looking at this for 30, 40 years, but we still, it's completely impractical because we have a war, we have a world, an international order of hostility. They can't get together to deal with the climate, and I don't see how SRM will fly in this background of we have to have governance, and we've got China and the United States and Russia, we've got hot wars going on, for heaven's sake. So that's one. The other one is, as you'll know, a few years ago, and I think they sort of repeated it. There's the Biodiversity Convention for the moratorium on stratospheric cooling. But the other one, which you may not be aware of, is the one thing that civil society, the NGOs, are completely united on and passionate about, is to stop SRM. And so far, they've been successful even in, tiddly little experiments. So my point is, do not exclude MEER. Do not exclude artificial albedo. Get that going, push that as hard as you can, because SRM is going to be, with stratospheric injection, going to be a very hard sell. I don't think the scientists will support it. So we have accelerating global surface heating, as I mentioned. The media did get out the fact that it's unprecedented in 125,000 years. That was in AR6. And there's a quote from the media that we've just lived through the hottest 12 months in at least 125,000 years. This is crazy stuff, right? I mean, we are doing crazy stuff to ourselves and the planet. And what is even crazier is we haven't got ourselves together to really tackle it in a serious manner. And so we are on a hothouse scenario. We have a 15% increase in fossil CO2 coming in 2050. This is the image from the EIA, that's the US Energy Information Administration. In the future, we're going to have more fossil fuels, not less. The ratio between market of renewables and fossil fuels will take a little bit off the fossil fuels, but we're not looking at less fossil fuels. And of course, we have their campaign and their psychological, whatever you want to call it. So the fossil fuels representing the dark side are still triumphing. So why MEER is a must? I say unfortunately, because I mean, we never thought we'd ever rise at this point, did we? The other thing, of course, is that we've entered this, this makes everything worse. We've entered the methane feedback situation. Ewan Nisbet of University of London, he's been pretty good on this. He is the expert. There's no question. The scientists are completely agreed on this one. We have methane feedback. It's coming from the wetlands, and it's coming from the tropical wetlands, as you might be expected, but also it's coming from the northern wetlands. This is bad, bad, bad. We're looking at temperature increases, which will become unlivable for billions in a matter of decades. We're looking at the global surface heating accelerating faster and faster. We will have increasing amplifying feedbacks. We'll be in that ultimate vicious cycle, right, of feedbacks feeding global warming and global warming still with emissions at record high. So here we are in this insane situation. We're into feedback, methane feedback, no less. And yet the governments and the system and the institutions are managing to keep increasing our fossil fuel CO2 emissions, and the other emissions are increasing. I got the data from Edgar, and methane emissions are increasing, nitrous oxide emissions are increasing. The most potent greenhouse gases of all, the F gases, they're actually increasing faster than any of the others. Yeah, they're in tiny proportions, but they're getting a significant amount of forcing creeping in now. So there's the official, if you want, atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations. This was from WMO, World Meteorological Organization, the Greenhouse Gas Bulletin. So it's 2022, but I want to point out that it's very clear. You've got the growth rates underneath there. It's very clear that over just the past couple of decades, these are all accelerating. I say accelerating a lot. Scientists don't like that word, but that's the situation we're clearly in. And I put a little side box there on the methane so that you can see that feedback in the past. It started 2019, and it's just explosive. It's tapered off a little bit now, but it will not quit. This is uncontrollable, as you and Nesbitt has said. And methane last year was a 254% increase. It's now 266. So the methane atmospheric concentration, which we pushed up, is 2.6-fold higher than normal or pre-industrial. And that doesn't seem to wake people up, my God. So there's a good image. It's an older image from the European Space Agency, but it really does show the tropical wetlands there. A lot of wetlands, peat-rich wetlands in the Amazon. So look at the Amazon; it's completely covered. And then in Congo, in the Congo rainforest, we've got a lot of wetlands. In the Sud, on the other side of East Africa, we've got wetlands. Now, there are also wetlands up in the north of China as well, but of course, China and India are a source of methane from natural gas, as is the whole world. But they're also a big source of methane from livestock. China has the largest livestock herd in the world. Down below, there's a map, the pink-red map, that is a map of the wetlands. And there on the right, from GOSAT, you can see the huge jump in atmospheric methane. Thanks, Jill. So these are quotes from the also conservative WMO. So their last just published Greenhouse Gas Bulletin stated for the first time, the Earth's climate system has multiple feedback loops, including increased carbon emissions from soils and reduced carbon uptake by oceans and forests due to the changing climate. Yeah, they're right, and it's happening. We already have reduced efficiency of the forest carbon sinks. That's hardly surprising with the state of the Amazon, but also the oceans. There was another paper out there. So everything is getting worse. Everything's getting against us, or I should say getting against our future. So the other quote that the WMO makes is on tipping points. The climate system may be on the brink of tipping points, critical thresholds. Well, we are definitely are committed warming, which is what we should have been always guiding ourselves by. Global warming is not the metric in the climate convention. The metric is properly atmospheric greenhouse gases. And we should be assessing climate not on present warming, but on committed warming. We should always have been doing that. And on committed warming, you can see all of the big sources of feedback to be triggered. The paper 2018, the paper by Will Steffen and Rockstrom, is a very, very important paper. You know, the Hothouse Earth paper, the trajectories of the Anthropocene. I went to their original data, and all of their tipping points, every single one, is vulnerable at 2 degrees C, every one. And of course, the EU and the scientists decades ago knew that. That was one of the reasons why they chose 2 degrees C, but one of the reasons why they said that 2 degrees C is not safe because it doesn't actually exclude runaway. So we need a massive, massive global venture. We need to stop fighting each other, put all these hundreds of billions of dollars out of the war machine and into a rescue attempt for our future. And this must be on the model of Manhattan, of Apollo, of Marshall. We have precedents that we can do this, that not only humanity, but the United States, for heaven's sake, can do this. We have to convince, of course, everybody that we have to totally decarbonize, and that means ending the age of fossil fuels. You know the game they're playing with us right now. They've been working up to it for a long time. That 1.5 degrees C, they're going to say is okay because we can remove all that CO2. It's absolute madness. We need a serious project like this, of which MEER and other methods of artificial albedo would, to my mind, be absolutely key. We mustn't exclude any of these. They must be fully resourced, fully financed.
Thank you, Peter. We are now going to hear from one or two people from our MEER community. Ukap Pandi is currently pursuing a master's in physics at Fergusson College in India, and is an avid believer in the preservation of the environment and of our Mother Earth. So hello, Ukap. Thank you also for staying up late to participate in this. So good to see you. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
ma'am. Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask that how much time will this project take to complete globally, like to overcome this project globally? How much time will it take?
No, we have an entire planet to save, right? We're in the sixth extinction, as you know. Life is literally disappearing around us. We've only just started to lose more species due to climate change. That is projected to become the largest driver of climate change by mid-century. So this is a massive, massive, massive project which we must undertake. And it requires all the resources of the world, basically. So my view is that any reasonable project of intervention, both for cooling, but also even more important, for removing CO2, okay? If we don't remove CO2, we are not going to make it. And the methods that the IPCC proposes are, well, let me say, I don't like them. So we need to find an effective and benign method. And, it's the old thing, if we can send people to the moon and investigate how much methane there is on Mars, if we can do things like that, I'm sure that we have the ability to come up with nanoparticles, I believe is one idea that's been mentioned, to extract CO2 and put it somewhere where it's safe. We're not going to make it without doing that. Thank you very much for mentioning Mother Earth, by the way. I live in Canada. It's been my privilege to get to know a lot of First Nations people. There are two people in the world, those who know Earth is their mother, those that don't. I think we're seeing the outcome of that.
Okay,
So
thank you
for your
very
question,
much.
and good
Yeah,
luck with your studies. That's great.
thank you, Ukap. So we would like to open it up to a few questions from our live audience. If you'd like, you can type anything into the chat to, I believe, Peter Dines is showing up as co-host, or you might have already sent them along if you sent them to me, I did have a little technical issue earlier, so send that along again. But in the meantime, I have a question for you, Dr. Carter. You know, having been an emergency physician and now involved in the climate emergency, do you find that your own kind of response is sort of internally of a similar nature, like in your as when you did that work?
It's a great question. You're absolutely right. You know, for decades, people have been saying, well, how do you do this work? Well, I'm very fortunate because I've been trained, right, to face horrible, nasty, you know, situations that appear to be overwhelming, and you know, we do our medical protocols and we save a lot of lives. So I'm a lot more fortunate than you know, other of you that haven't had that experience. It must be very, very hard. And I have the greatest admiration for those who still have the emotional courage to face this worst ever situation that humanity has ever faced. You know, there's a lot of things about climate change that frustrates me, and one of them is always reading, this is one of the worst problems that you, no, this is the worst. I mean, there's absolutely no question about that one at all. So yes, and yeah, your sort of intuition is right. Medically, you know, I'm supposed to be trying to save, save as many lives as you can and relieve as much suffering as you can. And the one thing that really, really causes me some anguish is knowing how the children that we see today, the future, that they're being left with. I don't know how we can be doing that. I don't know how our leaders in government and our institutions, our leading institutions, can be doing that to you know, young children. They don't, and we're hearing that they are aware that their future is worse and in jeopardy. This should be a very strong motivation to put everything that we have together, all our resources, as I say, stop these damn wars, stop fighting each other, and fight the fossil fuel industry and fight for our future.
Yeah. Well, and in a certain way, I suppose, you know, as an emergency room physician, you had to stay incredibly calm while also acting with, you know, acting intelligently, swiftly, et cetera. And there's a certain way, you know, there's a certain irony to, like, if we all act calm, you know, what's going to happen? So it's interesting, but we have to act intelligently and you know, and swiftly, as you have pointed out, with all of the charts and graphs.
We literally have no time left. This idea that we've got a carbon budget to burn, absolute nonsense, right? We run out of time many years ago. Emissions should have been in decline actually by 2015. All of the literature for decades has projected that the very latest emissions had to be in decline was 2020. And here we are in 2023 and fiddling around with COP28.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's a question from somebody. What did you think of the president of COP saying there is, quote, no science behind demands for phase out of fossil fuels?
Well, the science is absolutely definite. I mean, it's the science of thermodynamics, right? It couldn't be more basic and definite. We're piling up heat-trapping greenhouse gases in the atmosphere at an unprecedented rate, by the way. The increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration, the IPCC AR6 says, is 5 to 10 times faster than anything in the past 45 to 50 million years. That's the insanity of what our civilization is doing, right? It's so obvious, and we're seeing it, for heaven's sake. We have accelerating global surface warming. Right now, the Northern Hemisphere is about 2.4 degrees C above pre-industrial. It's shooting up. Yeah, we've got an El Nino, but we're going to have to face worse El Ninos in the future. And the fundamental science, right? The radiative forcing, Earth energy imbalance. There are so many actually scientific avenues of evidence that we are in an accelerating state of heat forcing of the planet. There's no question about it.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question from Ed about whether, so can cooling projects be implemented at scale, in your opinion, all around the equator to cool the planet?
There's absolutely no reason why not, is there? I mean, we've known for decades, the IPCC has put its reports out, and every one of the IPCC reports, of course, has said that there are there are billions of most vulnerable people who live in the lower latitudes, the tropics and the subtropics. And we have papers now projecting that it's not going to be too far away when the wet bulb temperatures will be intolerable and people will really die and places will be uninhabitable. We have to take this on. Unfortunately, during all my time of being involved in climate change, there's been a very inappropriate response from leading scientists and also people in the NGOs by saying that you must not say anything that scares people, right? I've been hearing this for years and years and years, and I'm still hearing it. Now I'm hearing it from the leading climate scientists, right, who are saying we shouldn't be saying things that I don't say doomsday, but these climate scientists say that we are being doomers, and that's very nasty stuff. We're all doing this. We're not getting paid for it. We're doing it because we know it's the right thing to do. We know it's the only thing to do. And preventing people from becoming scared of the worst threat to the survival of civilization on our species ever, that is absurd. That's the last thing we do when we're treating, multiple injuries in a busy emergency department in a hospital, right? We just go at it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I have a question from Barbara. Let me just get to this. Okay. How do climate activists overcome feelings of helplessness and despondency given the worsening situation? What is the best strategy to change humanity's omnicidal trajectory? It's kind of two different questions, but
well, you're right on the omnicidal trajectory, and that is so important that is recognized. Everything, all those indicators, ocean heat, ocean acidification, all the greenhouse gases, you go on and on and on, they're all accelerating. And all of them had to have been going into decline years ago. And, the big paper on the Earth energy imbalance pointed out that actually we have to drive the Earth energy balance back to neutral. And that would be equivalent, they say in their paper, to 350 parts per million of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And that's back to James Hansen years ago. Sorry, yeah, I'm swinging around in my chair.
Okay, I think I have one more question. Were you going to finish your thought? Okay.
I should mention that one thing that does help me a lot is years ago, I read Gandhi's autobiography. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's so honest. And he explains that the thing you must avoid in a big project, big campaign, is thinking about success or failure. he was very strong about that. Do not do that. That's the way you fail, by thinking about future success and failure. Just concentrate on your project. Do what is right in the best kind of way that you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that's an important point that people forget about also, that we just have to keep, we have to keep at it no matter what. Okay, I have just maybe two more questions. So if that's okay.
Mhm.
Aria is asking, don't we need cooler temperatures in the poles to help keep the weather patterns moving properly? Would cooling the equator further interfere with the polar vortex? Because of course it's such a complex system, and we're tinkering with it.
If we're using artificial albedo, like the MEER idea, then I don't think we have to worry about
Right.
a cooling effect getting out of hand. That is a concern with SRM, that you might take it too far, right? But you mentioned the Arctic. The Arctic has to be cool, right? We're only a few years away from the Arctic summer sea ice disappearing altogether. When it does, it's like adding 25% of our greenhouse gas emissions. It's a massive increase in forcing. And we already have, as I say, we have feedback. We have Arctic feedback. We've entered this worst stage that we never thought we will be crazy enough to allow to happen. In the Arctic, we've got, I follow them from the Copernicus satellite data, which is absolutely superb. ESA have been working on this for decades, so that their satellites can give us the concentrations right on the surface of CO2 and methane. And right through the summer and into September, northern wetlands were putting out a lot of methane, as well as tropical wetlands. And again, we had a little bit of methane coming from Siberian permafrost. It seems that every couple of years we see a bit of that. And of course, that's the worst of all things. But the Arctic is the cascading, right? We have the biggest feedbacks are all Arctic. There's 5 of them. They're all huge, huge sources, and they cascade onto each other. And we absolutely have to prevent that happening, and that means Arctic cooling.
Yeah.
So Peter
Okay.
Wadhams is absolutely right on that.
Pardon?
Peter Wadhams,
Yes, right.
sort of he's a wonderful man.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been still pushing that, and that's a lifesaver that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe one closing question. How do we avoid people just seeking profits from the climate emergency? And we are seeing that more and more.
Well, yes. I mean, this is the civilization that we live in, right? It's getting worse in that respect. That's my personal observation anyway. It's amazing that 2,000 years ago, a group of people, when there weren't that much money around in circulation, figured out that money was the root of all evil, right? So we're still that. But I think the question to me is, what are we going to do with the economics, right? That's the question. First of all, of course, we have to force, and we all have to rise up. We have to mobilize the entire world. We cannot allow our governments to be giving $7 trillion a year in fossil fuel subsidies of our money so that these corporations can destroy our future, right? There never has been anything more obviously evil than today, governments giving huge amounts of money to the fossil fuel industry. That's as bad as anything can ever get. So we have to address that, and that means mobilization and rising up and protest. And I admire the young people who are protesting, and I'm very sad that the governments are not dealing well with them. I think that's absolutely terrible. But I guess our governments are absolutely terrible. Then we have to stop, and Antonio Guterres has recommended this. We have to stop all the subsidies. So subsidies to the meat and livestock industry, right? That has to be stopped. So we've always known that our economy, our constant growth economics, was an omnicidal economy, if I can use your term. So we do have to make market failure corrections. And the first one is to stop all these subsidies. The only way we can do that is everybody on the planet rising up against our government doing this. And then if the economics is you're quite right, the economics is perverse, it's inherently perverse. So if we can do what Stern said in 2006, my God, that's a long time ago, and correct the market failures, that can make a very, very huge difference. The one thing is about the market economy is that it's terribly sensitive, and it's very, very powerful. And in my view, that is why for at least 20 years, the COPs, the big conferences, have been always putting out their great achievements that never happened, has always been putting out, oh, things are good, because I don't think they want to send a message to the market that fossil fuel energy is going to end. I think that's what's going on there. So we should be able to use the market for our benefit, but yeah, it's always a fear that the profit motive will run everything.
No. Well, we are so glad you could be with us today and talk with us. And thank you for your support, your voice in support of MEER and solutions that will, go in the other direction as where we are going. So thank you, Dr. Carter. Really appreciate you being here.
It's great meeting you all, and thank you very much. This sort of thing to me is a great encouragement, to know that there are people out there who maintain their sanity and their sensitivity and intend to do the best that they can about this terrible problem. So I thank you as well.
Thank you. At MEER, we are working to help educate the public while also developing a solution to the warming on the planet. We invite you to continue to learn about Earth's energy imbalance and climate science on our website. As you may know, we are an almost 100% volunteer staff, so please do consider, if you haven't already, making a monthly donation of any amount. And if you enjoyed being here, learned something, please let somebody else know about MEER Talks. You can check out our YouTube channel, MEER SRM, and also social media. So we are looking forward to seeing you again when Peter Ward will be visiting with us. So until then, we're wishing you well.